Let's talk about the fall of Piers Morgan and the latest update on the UK testing and the lockdown situation. Well, hello everybody and welcome to today's show. Today we're actually joined by the Telegraph's Madeline Grant. I interviewed her earlier on the UK testing, the role of the media, the lockdown and the government and everything. But first, let's talk about Piers Morgan. Now, as you may know, Piers Morgan is one of the top UK broadcasters. He's had a lot of ups and downs throughout his career, and he then went through another period during the whole post-Brexit. He was standing up against the so-called Remoaners, and he was pretty good at that, and he became popular. He actually made the ITV's Good Morning Britain relevant again. He's entertaining, he provokes, he's controversial, but that tactic sometimes could actually be damaging to your own credibility and reputation. This is happening right now because in the name of keeping and holding the government to account, he's slightly losing his mind. So throughout this whole last couple of months, he's been criticizing the government, which is fine, that's the job of the media, but he fails to acknowledge when things go right and give credit to Boris Johnson's team. One of these situations was yesterday when, for the first time, the UK government managed to hit the 100,000 testing target that they set for themselves. And Piers Morgan tried to find a way to, instead of congratulating the government, to find the flaw. Now, I understand what his situation is, because it's actually the fault of the UK government. When they set this target, 100,000 testing a day, in one document they said it's 100,000 tests, and in another tweet they said 100,000 tests per person. So that was a bit of a kind of issue, the lack of communication that happened, and because of that, but we know that deep down, the actual documents, official documents, didn't really mention testing people. It just said 100,000 tests a day, and that's still fine. And the government hit it. But Piers Morgan, again, found a way to just attack Boris Johnson. And even on talk radio, we've had a lot of presenters attacking him. Mark Dolan is one of those.
Well, this is Piers Morgan on Twitter. I can't tear it up. So all I can do is here's my smartphone. I just got to chuck it on the floor, because honestly, how can you not celebrate the fact that all of our health professionals, the administrators, the scientific advisors, government ministers, the Department of Health have got together and they've achieved the most extraordinary thing. Yes, we were very far behind the Germans when it came to testing, but we got there. And in fact, we got there and then some. Piers Morgan, stick that in your pipe and smoke it. This is Talk Radio.
Well, that's a fair point. And this is exactly why the ITV's Good Morning Britain ratings are going down massively, because people are losing patience. They enjoy the entertainment side of the show and Piers Morgan, but at this point, people I think need a bit more positivity. And this whole fear-mongering and negativity that's been spread by the mainstream media and the broadcasters is a bit of a problem at this point. The hero has now fallen. But let's talk about the UK testing and the lockdown situation and what the government could be doing. So, as I said, I interviewed Madeline Grant from The Telegraph earlier. So let's watch that segment.
Right, so thanks for coming on the show, Madeline. How's the lockdown treating you?
Oh, very well, thank you. Very well. I'm actually in the office today, which is quite rare, but we take it in turns to kind of keep an eye on the pages, and today it was my go. So I'm in the office, and actually I didn't realise quite how much I miss working with other people around and not being locked at home, particularly with the awful weather we had the last few days. So I was actually really delighted to be going to the office this morning.
There are not many people in the office, are they? Like at this
No. There's I think Skeleton Crew is maybe giving it a bit too much credit. It's more like a kind of ghost ship. But it's just nice to have any kind of human contact, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. It's been weeks now. Actually, the second phase of the lockdown, the second week of the 3-week period, it's actually gone pretty quickly. But especially we have had some good news. The numbers are looking good. The whole car thing is going well. And yesterday we heard, that the testing until yesterday, they actually finally hit the target. So what do you think of the whole situation, especially when it comes to testing?
With the testing situation, well, it's obviously good news, and I think that I'm actually less concerned with whether the government, some people say that the figure was fudged because it was including some tests that hadn't yet returned to laboratories and they'd only been sent off. I think that the actual nitty gritty of that figure is less important than the fact that they have massively increased capacity in a way that I think very few people expected. So it's a big coup for the government, and it's good news for us as a country because it means that they can now start to move towards strategies that will help to get us out of this horrible lockdown position that we found ourselves in. So when you have testing of that scale, we don't yet have the capacity to do the tracking and tracing that other countries have. We don't have that kind of machinery ready yet, but certainly expanding testing to this scale means that we can start to contemplate different strategies to ease the lockdown restrictions, which we haven't been able to do so far. So I think it's great news, and politically it's great. It's Matt Hancock has really, I think, surprised a lot of people with this. Some would have said that it was a bit of a bad idea to have to put yourself on the line in that way with such a ambitious target, but actually I think it has really galvanized the private sector and the public sector, and the fact that they've achieved it is a real coup.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Firstly, like I've been very impressed because I'm always a massive opponent of not necessarily Matt Hancock, but certain type of politicians like Matt Hancock. And even when he was first appointed to this role, I was questioning it. I was like, why? Actually, yeah. At this point, he's doing really well. So he's surviving. That's all that matters.
He's doing well. My concern about Matt Hancock was generally that I felt that when he became health minister, he very quickly started to basically sound like a Labour politician when talking about the NHS. It's never the NHS, it's always our beloved, precious, magnificent NHS. And given that, well, I personally believe, and it's a very unpopular opinion in this country, that the NHS needs serious reform, and that we need to start looking at what other countries do and get better results, better outcomes. And we're prevented from having these discussions because of the cult of the NHS and the fact that we have to clap for it every Thursday, and the fact that it's our NHS, etc. So I was a bit alarmed to hear a Conservative health minister speaking in those terms, because I think it puts those kind of necessary conversations, it kicks them into the long grass. But he's done a great job with the testing.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a great job as his role and as a representative of the government. But I fully agree with you that I think that we've created this problem now during this problem with the current crisis, that the NHS is actually becoming even more untouchable. You can't even talk about reform, like slight reform, because it's now a complete religion. Every Thursday, yeah. And we were talking about testing earlier. We have countries like Germany and others who are doing better. And a lot of people say that it's because the healthcare is slightly more decentralized and it's private providers are involved.
I think that's undeniable when it comes to testing, really, because Germany has this decentralized healthcare system. It also has far greater levels of public sector involvement in testing, and it uses private lab capacity. I mean, it just does have more capacity than we do for those kind of tests. But Public Health England, which is the body that's been overseeing our response to the pandemic, there's been, in the last month or 6 weeks or something, a range of quite damaging revelations have come out about Public Health England. One of the big trends that we've seen is that they've generally been very averse to joining up with the private sector, and they've had a kind of rather micromanaging the strategy from the top down, and it has often failed very badly. And so I think there have to be conversations about whether that command and control approach is the way to carry on, in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's one debate when it's the actual NHS, and then you've got the Public Health England side, which is even more geographically centralized.
Yeah.
I don't understand why we have a system like this anyway. Is there a way to maybe at some point in the future, instead of initially reforming the NHS, to start by touching Public Health England first and then move on to the NHS?
Well, I mean, I don't know enough about Public Health England really to talk about the kind of reforms that it needs, but I think that one I don't know if we could talk about good things coming out of the coronavirus, but I think one thing that we've noticed is that we are actually looking at best practice abroad in a way that we're having to think imaginatively, in a way that we have not done with healthcare in any respect for decades, and I think it's been to our it's been to the detriment of us all that we haven't had those conversations. I certainly think that the top-down approach, and it seems like the news today with the news yesterday with the testing, that seems to have been a triumph of public and private sector working together, and that's the way to go. You don't want to have a system where everything is being managed from the top down, and there's a reluctance to work with people who have the capability and are desperate to help, but you're refusing their overtures.
Yeah, you're right. I think this is a situation where it's kind of out of hands and control. And I think one thing that we can discuss, for example, is post this situation and the whole recovery, especially economically. Are you one of those people who are actually kind of like myself, worried about how we're going to come out of it economically? Are we going to be doing the whole let's just tax more and borrow more, or should we go back to sensible, conservative, kind of fiscal conservatism side of it?
Well, my big concern right now actually is that the government, that we will struggle to get out of the lockdown, not just because we have politicians who don't want to be seen to have blood on their hands, but also because in some ways the government's messaging strategy, stay home, I hate the fact that they say stay home and not stay at home, but that's beside the point. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. That's been so effective now that if you look at the polling on this, something like 28% of us, according to the last YouGov poll that I saw, wouldn't feel safe leaving our homes. They wouldn't want to see the restrictions lifted at all, even if the government actually met the 5 tests for lifting the lockdown. So this messaging has really cut through in the same way that Get Brexit Done and Take Back Control cut through. And unsurprisingly, when people have been told that they're putting themselves at great risk if they leave the home, devising a strategy now, a messaging strategy that says it's okay to leave your home. We want you to be spending money. We want you to be putting money back into the economy. We want you to be going to work. And also, if we reopen schools, then it's safe to send your kid to school. These are all things that need to happen for our economy to get back on any kind of footing. I think a lot of people will still be too scared to engage in that way. So that's what I'm most scared of, that the government has actually been a victim of its own success. The messaging has been too effective.
And you're right, because I think this government, especially under Boris, since this is the whole, generally speaking, the Vote Leave team getting together, they are very good at messaging. They won the 2019 election based on this reality. And I think this is the time when their strong message is actually the problem. And
totally.
I'm now thinking, like, Keir Starmer, as the new Labour leader, came out, and from day one he decided that his position should be to just talk about the exit strategy. Now, if we had the Labour government right now with Keir Starmer, we would have been out of the lockdown by then.
I wouldn't go that far. I think there's generally the vested interest in adopting a different position to your opponent just to make yourself stand out. You might find that if Keir Starmer were Labour minister, you get some of the more. I mean, I think, for example, Boris Johnson. One of the things that actually I've never been a kind of uncritical supporter of Boris Johnson by any means. But one of the things that I did like was the fact that he seemed reluctant to implement these massive, drastic restrictions. It seemed that he was uncomfortable with that. It didn't feel in keeping with his personality. So in a way, I'm glad that we've got someone who doesn't love the fact that they're having to take all our freedoms away from us in this way. I could imagine that if Keir Starmer were Prime Minister right now, that Boris Johnson would be leading the charge anti-lockdown.
It's politics.
It's politics. But yeah, I think with Keir Starmer, I mean, the difficulty for Labour is just that I think a lot of people have stopped listening to anything that they say. Really, that they feel like a massively diminished political force. Even though I think a lot of what Keir Starmer's doing has been really sensible and talking. I think he understands the scale of the problem, that the people that you need to reach out to and rebuild trust and so on. But there's an awful lot of work to be done there. There's an awful lot of trust that has been destroyed by Jeremy Corbyn and before that the Blairism, I guess.
Before I kind of continue about the whole Keir Starmer phenomenon, if it is, because you mentioned Boris, and this is what we've got, that he was actually uncomfortable with this whole situation from the beginning, kind of on the economy. But this kind of also proves, there's no conspiracy theories about Dominic Cummings running everything. It's actually like we just discovered that he was in favor of the lockdown. And now that considering Boris wasn't, that just proves that, you know, Boris isn't just letting Dominic Cummings just like run the whole show. He would still show that, you know, he's not comfortable with something, you know. So I don't think Dominic Cummings is a puppet.
Well, everyone said that the herd immunity strategy was, which actually wasn't, that was in itself misleading, because the strategy was not to go for herd immunity. That's not what Sweden have been doing, for example. Their strategy was to shield the vulnerable, and herd immunity is a kind of is a secondary outcome of achieving your primary objective. So it's not quite the same as they were going for herd immunity. But that's probably going to have to be a part of any society that comes out of this. Will have to take on a certain amount of herd immunity. But that was painted by predominantly the kind of the left-wing media and the lunatics that inhabit the Twitter bubble as a kind of sinister Dominic Cummings-led idea that was informed not by science but by, you know, whatever weird, strange reading material he'd been imbibing that day. Because there is a lot of I think sometimes Cummings is because he doesn't speak publicly about things, there's an awful lot of myth and mystique that goes around him that's not necessarily true. And it's a mixture of the public. People are always interested in leaders having close advisors because we're never sure quite how much influencing is happening. But actually it turns out that was complete nonsense, that the herd immunity strategy, that actually in SAGE meetings Dominic Cummings was pushing hard for a lockdown when he saw some of the mortality estimates that were coming out of it. So that was also wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot of mistake. Again, it's all based on Twitter, and Twitter is not the real life.
Thank God.
Or you were talking about lefty loonies and all that. There's also a cult based on personalities. Where there's certain journalists like Robert Peston, and you know, at this point, not really left wing, but Piers Morgan going crazy and all that. But also celebrities. Meghan Markle, one of those.
Meghan Markle. Well,
I mean, not on this topic, but generally speaking, it's a whole mentality where social media and celebrities, everything's so magnified. And there's obviously this debate right now, for example, Meghan Markle and the Mail on Sunday and all this sort of stuff. And is there a side? Can we pick sides despite, you know, that, you know, we say, you know, we don't like this person or that one? Or is Meghan Markle basically just wrong about the press at this point?
It's a difficult question. I mean, obviously we don't know how the rest of the court case is going to go, but it does seem that she and her team have overestimated the extent to which they had a case in certain areas. I think Meghan Markle has had some bad treatment from some sections of the press, but she's also had, I think there is a tendency to ignore the overwhelmingly positive reception that she received at the beginning when she first entered the family, and the royal wedding itself. Everyone was absolutely delighted. And I think that what annoys, obviously there has been some racism directed against her, and there has been some, but I think overwhelmingly there is something in the British DNA, I think, that really hates hypocrites. That's always I think that's the reason that people generally don't hate Boris Johnson, because what his sins are, you know, his colourful private life and so on, he doesn't really pretend to be anything else, and I think people can get behind that. He's a kind of lovable rogue. He never pretended to be anything different. It's hypocrites that they really hate, and I think that the Sussexes have often seemed to demand many of the benefits of being in the royal family. They want to draw attention to their pet causes. They want to live quite a glamorous jet set kind of life, but they also reject the attention that naturally comes from being in that position. And when they wanted to leave the royal family, they could have been more like the Swedish royal family or the Dutch royal family who cycle around Amsterdam and have regular jobs and so on. But they didn't want that. They wanted to go and build a brand empire and make lots of money. And I think it was the hypocrisy of that kind of grated on people more than any anger at there being, you know, an American marrying into the royal family, or even racism. Although, of course, there was some of that. I don't think it was the overriding emotion.
Yeah, and as I said, primarily not by the press. I don't have any evidence of the press kind of doing that against her. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's a weird situation.
I mean, there's a couple of small examples of, like, Rachel Johnson wrote a column that talked about her having exotic DNA, bringing that. But I mean, you know, you don't want to sound like some kind of eugenicist, but you know, royal families over centuries have been pretty bloody inbred. So maybe, you know, I don't know. I'm just even the examples that people give are. Yeah, not on the scale of outrage that has accompanied them, perhaps.
Yeah, but again, on the other hand, you're right that, you know, the royal family.
Yeah, that's why they all have haemophilia in their hair lips.
For a long time.
Yeah. Have you seen the Habsburg lip? It's like out here.
Just not get censored on YouTube. But thanks again for coming on the show, and hopefully we can.
My pleasure.
Next episode in person after this whole chaos. So, do you have any words? Anything you want to say?
No, just to say thank you for a fun conversation. It was great.
Well, thank you for watching. At 7 o'clock tonight, we have a live stream, a bit of a live Q&A. And at 8 p.m, we have the daily vlogs, Maya's Life, where we're going to be talking about the Scottish Government and free speech. So make sure to tune in at 7 and then at 8 p.m. I know it's a bit of too much Maya for one day, but, you know, you could just spread it around. Yeah, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and click on that bell next to it so you get notified. We have a daily show. And I'm Maya Tousi. I'll see you guys at 7 o'clock with a live stream.